He was the CEO who seemed to have it all: a picture-perfect marriage, beautiful family, a thriving business empire, and a life most people could only dream of. James Adler was the man everyone envied. But beneath the surface of his carefully curated image lay a web of secrets and lies, so tangled they would lead to a shocking and violent end. What happens when betrayal and manipulation collide with love and trust? How far would someone go when the person they loved most turned out to be their greatest deceiver? Today, we unravel the chilling story of James Adler, a man whose perfect life shattered in a single, terrifying moment of revenge. But before we dive into this jaw-dropping tale, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Inspector Stan. Get ready for more incredible cases that explore the darkest corners of love, lies, and betrayal. James Adler was a man who seemed untouchable. As the CEO of a highly successful tech firm, he exuded confidence, intelligence, and charisma. To those who met him, James was the epitome of the American dream, a self-made man who rose to the top with hard work and sheer determination. His sharp suits, luxurious cars, and sprawling Los Angeles estate served as constant reminders of his wealth and influence. Yet, it was his image as a family man that set him apart from the rest of the city's elite. James was married to Laura Adler, a former attorney who had left behind a promising legal career to focus on their family and support James' ambitions. Laura was everything James was not: grounded, warm, and approachable. Her philanthropic work and dedication to their 2 teenage children made her beloved in their affluent community. Friends often described her as the glue that held the Adler family together, a compassionate soul who worked tirelessly to ensure her family's happiness and success. Their 2 children, Emma and Jacob, were the perfect reflections of the Adler family's success. Emma, the oldest at 17, was an accomplished honor student with a passion for art, while 15-year-old Jacob excelled in athletics, particularly soccer. Both children were raised to value hard work and tradition, often appearing alongside their parents at charity galas and family events. James and Laura took great pride in presenting themselves as doting parents who supported their children's every endeavor. Together, the Adlers were a power family, admired for their seemingly flawless partnership and picture-perfect home life. They hosted grand parties in their palatial home, attended by the city's elite, where they were the perfect hosts. Social media was filled with snapshots of the Adler family enjoying luxury vacations, celebrating milestones, or simply lounging in their impeccably decorated home. To the outside world, they were the embodiment of a modern fairy tale, a beautiful, successful family living a life of glamour and harmony. Their annual anniversary celebrations were particularly grand. James spared no expense to remind everyone of his devotion to Laura. Lavish dinner parties, expensive gifts, and heartfelt speeches were the norm, and the couple's love story was one that many envied. Laura often expressed gratitude for James' support and love, while James never missed an opportunity to publicly praise his wife's sacrifices and strength. To their friends and neighbors, they seemed invincible, a couple who had it all. But beneath this perfect exterior lay cracks that no one could see. Laura, despite her outward confidence, had begun to feel the strain of their public image. Behind the smiles and social media posts, there were whispers of tension, of a distance between the couple that no one dared to ask about directly. James' increasing time spent away from home, under the guise of business obligations, began to wear on Laura. Meanwhile, Emma and Jacob, though thriving, began to sense an unspoken tension at home, but they too pushed it aside, unwilling to disrupt the carefully maintained family harmony. In the world James and Laura inhabited, appearances were everything. They had worked hard to maintain their pristine reputation, and the fear of losing it loomed over them like a shadow. The Adlers were masters of illusion, ensuring that no one, not even their closest friends, suspected the turmoil brewing beneath the surface. The Adler family's image as the perfect family was their strongest asset, but it would soon become their greatest weakness. James, with his charm and charisma, had built a life that revolved around perception. Yet, as time would reveal, this facade was as fragile as glass, and one carefully hidden secret would shatter it all. Behind James Adler's perfectly crafted facade lay a web of lies and manipulation that only he knew how to navigate. His double life, a stark contrast to the image of a devoted husband and father, was one he carefully curated. James had not one, but three mistresses, each of them drawn into his orbit by his charm, wealth, and ability to say exactly what they needed to hear. Chloe, a glamorous model with a burgeoning career, was captivated by James' sophistication and the promises he made to support her ambitions. He dazzled her with expensive gifts, lavish trips, and whispered reassurances that his marriage to Laura was nothing more than a hollow arrangement. Chloe believed she was James' escape, the one person who truly understood him. Vanessa, an ambitious marketing executive, was another of James' conquests. With her career-driven mindset and independent streak, Vanessa wasn't easily impressed, but James knew exactly how to win her over. He painted a picture of a man trapped in a loveless marriage, yearning for someone who could match his passion and intellect. He promised Vanessa they would build a future together, convincing her to see him not as a cheater, but as a man who had found his true partner in her. Then there was Sophia, a kind-hearted waitress James met during a business lunch. Unlike Chloe and Vanessa, Sophia wasn't impressed by material wealth. Instead, James won her over with his attentiveness and the narrative of a man who craved simplicity and authenticity. Sophia, who had struggled to make ends meet, found comfort in James' promises of stability in his claims that he longed for a quieter, more meaningful life, one he could only have with her. James' ability to compartmentalize these relationships was both his strength and his downfall. He skillfully juggled his time between them, using business trips and late meetings as excuses to keep each woman believing she was his priority. He convinced all three that his marriage to Laura was over in all but name, that he was only staying for the sake of his children. It was a lie he told so often that even he began to believe it at times. For a while, James maintained this precarious balancing act with ease. His charm and calculated deceit kept the women from questioning him too deeply, and his wealth ensured they never felt neglected. However, as his lies multiplied, the cracks in his carefully constructed double life began to show. One evening, Chloe received a text message from James that wasn't meant for her. The message was short but unmistakable, a term of endearment directed at Vanessa. At first, Chloe dismissed it as a mistake, but her instincts told her otherwise. Suspicious, she began to dig deeper, scrolling through social media and searching for signs of James' connection to other women. It wasn't long before she stumbled upon Vanessa's profile, where subtle clues, matching jewelry, cryptic captions, and locations that mirrored her own experiences, confirmed her worst fears. Enraged and heartbroken, Chloe decided to confront James. When she demanded answers, he attempted to dismiss her concerns, using his practiced charm to calm her down. But Chloe wasn't convinced. She contacted Vanessa directly, sharing her story and discovering that Vanessa, too, had been fed the same lies. The two women, now united by their shared betrayal, dug even deeper. It didn't take long for them to find Sophia, who was initially reluctant to believe them but eventually accepted the truth after hearing their stories. Together, the three women pieced together the full extent of James' deceit. James' carelessness and arrogance had finally caught up with him. The very women he had manipulated were now united against him, their heartbreak turning into a simmering fury. For years, James had managed to control every aspect of his double life, but with each lie exposed, his carefully curated world began to crumble. The weight of his deception was becoming too much for even James to handle. His double life, once a source of excitement and power, was now a ticking time bomb. And the fallout, when it came, would be devastating. The tension that had been building for months finally reached its boiling point when Chloe uncovered the full extent of James' deceit. She had stumbled upon Vanessa and Sophia, and after hours of frantic phone calls and messages, the three women found themselves united by their shared heartbreak and anger. The revelations had shattered their lives, each woman realizing she had been manipulated, used, and promised a future that would never come. They each had believed, at some point, that they were the one James truly wanted. But now, They saw the truth: he had been juggling them all, weaving a web of lies and empty promises to keep them under his control. Determined to confront the man who had hurt them so deeply, the women made a bold decision. They would not let James get away with his betrayal, especially not on the night when he was celebrating his perfect marriage with Laura. The anniversary party, an annual event that epitomized the public image of the Adler family, became the setting for their confrontation. James had invited everyone, from business partners to close friends, and of course, the media, ensuring that his carefully curated image as the devoted husband and father remained intact. Chloe, Vanessa, and Sophia arrived at the venue separately, each with a quiet fury burning inside them. As they entered the lavish ballroom, their hearts raced. The opulence around them only heightened the contrast between the glamorous world James had created and the pain they were feeling. Their eyes locked as they took in the scene: James, standing at the center of the room, laughing and celebrating with guests, his arm draped around Laura's waist. The perfect picture. But this time, the women would shatter that illusion. Without hesitation, Chloe was the first to approach James. As he turned to greet her, his smile faltered when he recognized her expression, anger and betrayal in equal measure. "James," Chloe began, her voice sharp, "you've been lying to all of us. All these years, you've been playing us, manipulating us like pawns in your little game." Vanessa and Sophia joined Chloe, their eyes burning with fury. "You promised us all the same thing," Vanessa added, her voice cracking but resolute. "You told me you were leaving her, that we were the future. But you were doing the same to all of us." James, momentarily stunned, quickly recovered his composure, flashing that trademark smile. "What is this nonsense? What are you three talking about?" His words were calm, but the underlying smugness was evident. "You know exactly what this is. You're just upset that I didn't pick you. Don't make a scene. It won't end well for any of you." Laura, still unaware of the confrontation unfolding in front of her, looked on from the side, her expression a mix of confusion and concern as she noticed the rising tension. She tried to approach, but Chloe raised a hand to stop her. "This isn't about you," Chloe snapped, her gaze never leaving James. "It's about him, and the lies he's been feeding us all. You think this man is some kind of saint? He's a coward, and he's been playing you just like he played us." The guests, once chatting and laughing, had started to notice the scene unfolding. Whispers spread through the crowd as James attempted to brush off the confrontation. "You're all just desperate, seeking attention," he sneered, glancing at each woman. "You think anyone will believe you over me? You're nothing but insignificant distractions in my life." But the women weren't done. Vanessa's eyes narrowed as she took a step forward. "If you think we're just going to walk away after everything you've done, you're wrong. You can't play all of us and get away with it." She gestured toward his wrist, where he wore an expensive watch, a watch James had promised to each of them, each one of them receiving the same model, each thinking it was a personal gift. "You gave us all the same watch, James," Sophia said quietly, but the weight of her words made everyone in the room stop. "You told us it was a symbol of your love, of your commitment. But now we see it for what it really is, just another lie." The realization hit like a slap to the face. The guests, once silent observers, began murmuring among themselves, piecing together the truth. James' bravado faltered for just a moment, his confident exterior cracking. He realized that his carefully crafted image was slipping through his fingers. His heart pounded as he tried to maintain control, but it was slipping away. "You don't know what you're doing," James spat, his voice turning cold. "If you expose me now, I will ruin each of you. I have the power to destroy your lives, your careers, your reputations. Do you really want to go down this road?" But the women weren't intimidated. Chloe stepped closer, her voice shaking with fury. "We're done being afraid of you, James. We're done being your secret." With that, the women turned to leave, their heads held high. The damage had been done. James, once a man who had controlled every aspect of his life, found himself vulnerable for the first time. The truth was out, and it was only a matter of time before it would all come crashing down. And as the women walked out of the room, they knew they had done what they had come to do, expose him for who he really was. The anniversary party, meant to celebrate the perfect marriage, had instead become the stage for James Adler's downfall. The air in the ballroom was thick with tension after the confrontation. As Chloe, Vanessa, and Sophia turned to leave, they were not done yet, not by a long shot. The weight of the humiliation they had just suffered at James' hands was unbearable. Each woman, at one point, had seen themselves as the woman he truly loved, the one he promised a future to. But now, they realized the true nature of the man they had allowed into their lives, a liar, a manipulator, and a master of deceit. Their trust had been shattered, and the pain was now all-consuming. With their anger boiling over, the women made a split-second decision. They abandoned their plan to expose James publicly. They would no longer play by his rules, live under the shadow of his power. Instead, they decided to take matters into their own hands. They knew exactly where to find the gun, one that James had given to Vanessa months earlier, under the pretext of providing her with protection after a series of threatening messages he had fabricated. It had seemed like a token of affection at the time, but now it would become an instrument of retribution. The three women made their way to the back of the venue, where the gun was hidden. Their minds were a blur of emotions, rage, betrayal, confusion, but in that moment, the decision was made. They would no longer be passive victims in James' web of lies. They were going to take control of their own fate. Each woman grabbed the gun, feeling its cold metal weight in their hands, and walked back into the room where James, blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to hit, stood surrounded by his guests. James noticed them as they re-entered the ballroom, but his usual smug grin quickly faded when he saw the determination in their eyes. "What the hell are you doing?" he spat, his voice laced with the arrogance that had defined him for so long. But the women didn't hesitate. Without a word, Chloe raised the gun and fired first. The loud bang shattered the tension, but James barely had time to react before Vanessa and Sophia followed suit. The shock in his eyes was evident as he crumpled to the ground, his body falling lifeless to the marble floor. The room erupted into chaos. Guests screamed, fled, and dropped to the ground, unsure of what had just transpired. For a few moments, it was utter pandemonium. Chloe, Vanessa, and Sophia stood over the lifeless body of James, their hands trembling but their faces expressionless. The anger and the pain that had driven them to this point seemed to drain out of them, leaving an eerie calm. They had crossed a line from which there would be no return. Panic set in among the partygoers as they realized the gravity of the situation. Some rushed to call the police, while others scrambled to escape the madness. The women, their faces now drained of all emotion, turned and walked toward the exit. They didn't run, there was no need. They knew the police would come, and they knew that the life they had once known was over. It didn't take long for law enforcement to arrive. Officers swarmed the venue, securing the area and finding James' body surrounded by a pool of blood. Witnesses were interviewed, and the three women were quickly apprehended. The shock of the event was still settling over the room as the police took Chloe, Vanessa, and Sophia into custody. Within hours, the media storm began. The story of James Adler's shocking murder was splashed across every news outlet. Social media buzzed with speculation, and reporters dug into the details of James' double life. As the public learned of his affairs with Chloe, Vanessa, and Sophia, the world's perception of the perfect CEO began to unravel. The truth about his manipulation, his lies, and his complete disregard for the women he had exploited came to light, sparking debates about power, privilege, and the consequences of unchecked egos. For the three women, the aftermath was as chaotic as the moment of the shooting itself. They were arrested and charged with murder, their lives now irrevocably changed. No longer seen as the victims of an emotionally abusive man, they became symbols of the tragic end that had come from a toxic, manipulative relationship. Their story was one of heartbreak, betrayal, and, ultimately, retribution. As the trial loomed on the horizon, the media frenzy continued to grow. Public opinion was split. Some saw the women as victims who had been pushed to the edge, while others condemned them for taking justice into their own hands. The legal battle that awaited them would be fierce, but one thing was certain: the lives of Chloe, Vanessa, and Sophia would never be the same. They had gone from being the mistresses of a powerful CEO to the women who killed him, forever etched in the public's memory as the tragic figures who brought an end to James Adler's reign of lies. The story of James Adler's brutal murder quickly morphed from a tragic crime to a nationwide sensation. News outlets were abuzz with the shocking details of the CEO's double life, while social media exploded with opinions, speculation, and debates about the women's motives. For days, the case dominated headlines, and the public became obsessed with the details, each new revelation adding fuel to the fire. People took sides. Some saw the women, Chloe, Vanessa, and Sophia, as vengeful killers, out for retribution after years of manipulation and emotional betrayal. Others viewed them as victims of James' emotional abuse and deceit, pushed to the brink by a man who had destroyed their lives with lies and broken promises. The case quickly divided the nation, with talk shows and podcasts dedicating entire episodes to discussing the events that led up to the murder. Commentators weighed in with strong opinions, some defending the women, arguing that they had been manipulated into believing James' promises of love, while others condemned their actions as unforgivable. Every new detail about James' life seemed to add a layer of complexity to the case, leaving the public questioning how far one man's lies could stretch before causing irreversible damage. As the investigation deepened, the true extent of James' web of lies came to light, and his personal and professional life began to unravel. Laura, still reeling from the shock of her husband's death and the revelations about his affairs, spoke out during the investigation. Her testimony painted a picture of a man who had carefully crafted an image of perfection, all while hiding a dark and destructive secret. She described the emotional toll his lies had taken on their marriage and how, over the years, she had slowly begun to suspect that something was amiss. Despite her suspicions, James had always been convincing, too convincing. "I never saw it coming," Laura said in one of her emotional interviews. "He was always so charming, so perfect. He made me believe that everything was fine, that our family was solid. But behind closed doors, he was a completely different person. I had no idea about the affairs. I had no idea he was manipulating these women, making them believe that he was going to leave me for them. I just didn't know." Her words resonated with many, especially those who had once admired James as the epitome of success and family values. As the story unfolded, friends and employees of James began to speak out, revealing disturbing details about his personal and professional life. Colleagues described James as a man who was skilled at projecting a facade of success and respectability, while behind the scenes, he engaged in ruthless business practices, cutting corners, and exploiting his employees for personal gain. Friends admitted that they had always found something off about him, but they had ignored the red flags, unable to see past the polished exterior. As the investigation continued, law enforcement uncovered further evidence of James' toxic behavior, including recorded voice memos from the night of the murder. The recordings were crucial in piecing together the final moments before the shooting. The tension between the women and James had been building for months, but on that fateful night, it reached a breaking point. The recordings revealed the escalation of the argument, the anger, the hurt, and the desperation in the women's voices as they confronted James, each one feeling betrayed and manipulated. The emotions were raw and unfiltered as they demanded answers, but when James dismissed their pain with arrogance and threats, the atmosphere shifted. What had begun as a heated confrontation turned into something darker and more dangerous. In one particularly revealing recording, Vanessa's voice wavered as she spoke to James, "You promised me. You promised all of us, and it was all lies. Do you think you can just walk away from this?" That you can keep treating us like this and get away with it. The hurt in her voice was palpable, and it was clear that the anger had built up over time, fed by the realization that James had been playing them all along. The last words in the recording, just before the sound of gunfire, sent chills through investigators. "We're done being your secret." The evidence continued to mount. Investigators uncovered text messages between James and the women, each message a reminder of the lies he had told to maintain his facade. In one text to Chloe, James had written, "I can't stand her anymore. I'm leaving soon, just be patient. You're the one I really want." To Vanessa, he sent a similar message, "You're the only one who understands me. I'll be free before you know it. Just wait a little longer." His manipulation had been deliberate, and the women had fallen for it, believing they were the ones he truly cared for. The gifts, expensive watches, lavish vacations, and promises of a future together, were just tools to keep them under his control, to ensure they remained loyal to him as he maintained his public image. As the trial drew closer, public opinion remained sharply divided. Some saw the women as victims who had been emotionally and psychologically abused, pushed to the brink by a man who had been living a lie. Others believed they had taken the law into their own hands, crossing a line that could never be undone. The legal team representing Chloe, Vanessa, and Sophia worked tirelessly to build a case that would show the emotional toll James' manipulation had taken on the women, while the prosecution focused on the cold-blooded nature of the murder. In the midst of the media frenzy, one thing was certain: James Adler's double life had caught up with him in the most tragic of ways. The women, once seen as the mistresses of a powerful CEO, had now become the faces of a shocking and brutal act of vengeance. The firestorm of reactions, fueled by betrayal, revenge, and shattered illusions, would continue to unfold as the case moved to trial, forcing the public to confront difficult questions about love, trust, and the cost of lies. As the trial of Chloe, Vanessa, and Sophia progressed, the courtroom became a battleground of conflicting emotions, legal strategies, and moral questions. The prosecution was relentless, portraying the women as cold, calculated murderers who had meticulously planned and executed the death of James Adler. They argued that the women's actions were not a result of an emotional outburst but rather a premeditated act of revenge, driven by jealousy and betrayal. The evidence, including the voice memos and the testimonies about the manipulative tactics James had used, was damning. The prosecution made it clear that, regardless of the emotional abuse they had suffered, the women had crossed a line, and their actions could not be excused by their pain. On the other side, the defense painted a picture of three women who had been psychologically and emotionally manipulated by a man who had preyed on their vulnerabilities. They argued that James had expertly crafted a facade of love and affection, only to use each of them for his own selfish desires. The defense highlighted the trauma and psychological scars left by James' lies, manipulations, and false promises. It became evident that James' charm and influence had left deep emotional wounds, and the defense suggested that the women's actions were an impulsive result of overwhelming desperation, not cold-blooded malice. Then came the unexpected. Laura Adler, James' wife, took the stand. Her testimony stunned everyone in the courtroom. For the first time, she spoke openly about the emotional abuse she had endured during her marriage to James. She described the gradual erosion of trust, the lies, and the gaslighting that had left her questioning her own reality. Laura admitted that she had suspected something was wrong but had never imagined the full extent of James' deceit. She recounted how he had manipulated her into believing their marriage was perfect, even while he was secretly carrying on with other women. In an emotional and deeply personal moment, Laura shared that she, too, had been a victim of James' cruelty. "I lived in a bubble of lies," Laura testified, her voice shaky but resolute. "I thought I was the wife of a successful man. I thought our family was a perfect picture. But behind that perfect image was a man who betrayed everyone around him. He used me, and he used them, just to feed his own ego." Her testimony shocked the courtroom, as many had viewed Laura as the ideal wife, completely unaware of the emotional turmoil she had been subjected to behind closed doors. Her words added a layer of complexity to the case, forcing the jury to consider the deeper emotional and psychological impact of James' actions on the women who had been manipulated by him. Despite the defense's compelling arguments and Laura's heartfelt testimony, the jury ultimately convicted Chloe, Vanessa, and Sophia of manslaughter, rather than first-degree murder. The judge acknowledged the mitigating circumstances of emotional abuse and manipulation, recognizing that while their actions were tragic, they had been driven by years of deception and emotional trauma. However, the court could not excuse the violence that had ended James' life, and the women were sentenced to 15 years in prison. The verdict was met with mixed reactions. Some applauded the jury for recognizing the emotional toll the women had suffered and for showing leniency in light of the circumstances. Others believed that the women should have faced harsher punishment for taking matters into their own hands. The case sparked widespread debate about accountability, emotional abuse, and whether it was possible to justify violent actions in response to prolonged manipulation. In the weeks that followed, the media continued to discuss the case, but the focus slowly shifted from the murder trial to the aftermath of the trial. Laura, now free from James' toxic legacy, focused on rebuilding her life and protecting her children from the scars of their father's deceit. The road to recovery was long, but she was determined to provide a stable and loving environment for her children, who had been left to grapple with the knowledge that their father was a man who had deceived them all. Laura's healing journey took an unexpected turn when she visited the women in prison. She wanted to offer them forgiveness, a step toward closure for everyone involved. The meeting was emotionally charged, filled with tears, apologies, and an understanding that, while their actions had been unforgivable, the pain they had all experienced had been immeasurable. "I don't know if what you did was right, but I understand why you did it," Laura said, her voice breaking as she addressed Chloe, Vanessa, and Sophia. "James manipulated all of us, and I hope you can find peace in knowing that you're not alone in this." The meeting did not erase the tragedy of the situation, but it offered a sense of healing, a moment of humanity amidst the horror. As Laura walked away from the prison that day, she felt a glimmer of hope that, despite the unimaginable pain caused by James Adler's lies, there was still a chance for everyone to move forward, to rebuild, and to find some measure of peace in the wreckage of their lives. As the women served their sentences, the public debate continued over their actions, and the legacy of James Adler's deceit would live on in the lives of those he had hurt. But for Laura, the end of the trial marked the beginning of a new chapter. One in which she would work to protect her children from the legacy of their father's manipulation and to build a life based on honesty, love, and healing. The road ahead would be long, but she was finally free to walk it on her own terms. This tragic case serves as a sobering reminder of the devastating consequences that can arise from lies, betrayal, and unchecked manipulation. James Adler's double life didn't just destroy his own, it shattered the lives of everyone around him. His carefully constructed world, built on deceit and false promises, ultimately led to a violent end, one that could have been avoided had the truth come to light sooner. The manipulation, the emotional abuse, and the lies were powerful forces that drove 3 women to the breaking point. In the end, no one walked away unscathed. Not James, not his family, and not the women who, despite their own suffering, became entangled in his web of lies. Was justice truly served in this case? The women, convicted of manslaughter, will serve 15 years in prison for their actions. But many are left wondering, could this tragedy have been prevented? Could the lies have been exposed before they reached the breaking point? Could the women have found another way to cope with the pain of betrayal and manipulation? These questions will linger, but one thing is clear, the truth has a way of coming to light, and when it does, the consequences can be devastating. If this story shocked you, like and subscribe to Inspector Stan for more tales of betrayal, secrets, and justice. Stay tuned for more chilling cases where the truth is far darker than anyone could have imagined.